Good evening, everyone. Today, I am here to talk to you about early rebellions against the British East India Company and their implications. This presentation will provide a detailed look into some of the major rebellions that took place during this time, as well as the events that led to these rebellions and their outcomes. Get ready to explore a fascinating and turbulent part of history. Throughout the period of British East India Company's rule in India, several uprisings and rebellions were carried out by the Indian people. These revolts were a result of the economic exploitation, cultural suppression and political oppression inflicted by the colonial masters. In this presentation, we shall look into some of the major rebellions that took place during this period. By tracing their history and examining the arguments that led to them, we will gain insight into the struggles waged by the Indian people in their fight for their rights and how they eventually impacted the country. The First War of Independence, commonly referred to as the Indian Rebellion of 1857, marked a major milestone in India's quest for independence from British rule. Numerous factors had stoked the flame of unrest, such as British laws and policies viewed as unjust and oppressive, the introduction of religious laws that were perceived as an effort to convert Indians to Christianity, and the utilization of Indian soldiers in foreign campaigns. The spark of the rebellion was a mutiny of Indian soldiers in Meerut, which spread quickly and saw civilians and other soldiers joining in. Key cities like Delhi were taken by the rebels, and their own government was established. The British responded with a military response, resulting in a long and protracted battle in which the British emerged victorious. The event had drastic consequences. The British tightened their control of India, and steps were taken to avert future insurrections. The Santhal Rebellion is an event of great significance in India's past. Preceding the Sepoy Mutiny by several years, it is remembered as one of the first major efforts to stand up against British rule in India. It saw the Santhal people joining together in opposition of the British East India Company, fighting hard for their rights to independence and freedom. Though their resistance eventually failed, the rebellion remains an important symbol and reminder of the people's courage and determination in the face of overwhelming power. It is a legacy that continues to inspire and remind us of the strength of the human spirit. The Pica Rebellion of 1817 was an organized struggle against the unjust policies of the British East India Company in Odisha, India. Led by Bakshi Jagabandhu Bidyadar, the head of the Khurda army, the rebels called for the liberation of peasants from the heavy taxation and enforced labor practices imposed by the company. The rebels managed to seize a number of British forts and take control of large parts of Odisha. However, the company sent an enormous military force to suppress the rebellion, which resulted in the death and capture of many of the rebels, including Bakshi Jagabandhu Bidyadar, who was then exiled to Cuttack. The Pica Rebellion illustrates a crucial moment of defiance during the colonial period and is a powerful reminder of the urge for freedom. The Vellore Mutiny of 1806 was an event of great significance in Indian history. On July 10, 1806, Indian sepoys rose up in rebellion against the East India Company, who had recently introduced new uniform regulations that violated their religious beliefs. The rebellion, which took place at the Vellore fort, resulted in the death of many British officers and soldiers before it was ultimately quelled by British forces. Though defeated, the mutiny sent an important message, that the East India Company needed to change their policies and treat Indian soldiers with more respect. The Vellore Mutiny was a reminder to all of the power of standing up for what is right, and of challenging an oppressive regime. The Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 was a major uprising in India against British rule, caused by various factors such as religious tensions, economic grievances, and resentment towards colonial rule. The impact of the Enfield rifle, containing rumored animal fats in greased cartridges, cannot be overstated in the revolt. Indian soldiers and civilians alike joined forces to oppose British rule, and at certain points, taking control of extensive territories. In the end, after a drawn-out and savage campaign, British forces managed to overpower the rebels and re-establish their authority in India. The Sannyasi Rebellion was an important episode in the history of British East India Company rule. A group of sannyasis initiated the uprising, triggered by the company's attempts to control and seize their land and resources. Joined by other groups such as peasants and zamindars, the sannyasis initially resisted the company. Nevertheless, the British eventually overwhelmed the rebellion, forcing the sannyasis to flee to the woods and consequently putting an end to the contention. This event was indicative of the harsh measures British would take to impose their authority and showed the strength of the sannyasi opposition to foreign domination. In 1873, the people of Pabna, now in Bangladesh, rose up in revolt against the oppressive British rule. The spark of the revolt was the British government's decision to raise revenue demands on local zamindars, which they felt was unfair. Led by Sanaullah and Muhammadan, they attacked and looted government offices, killed British officials and their supporters, and disrupted communication and transportation networks. Despite being ultimately crushed, their brave act of defiance inspired many other rebellions that followed. This was a powerful demonstration of the strength of the human spirit and the desire for freedom in the face of injustice. In the early 19th century, Syed Ahmed Barelvi initiated a rebellion against the British East India Company with the goal of establishing an Islamic state in India. This movement was heavily influenced by the teachings of the 18th-century Islamic scholar Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab and received significant support from the Muslims in Punjab and the northwest frontier province. In 1826, the Wahhabi warriors led by Syed Ahmed Barelvi captured the city of Peshawar and proclaimed it their new Islamic state's capital. However, the British East India Company quickly defeated the army in 1831, with Syed Ahmed Barelvi dying in battle. This marked the demise of the Wahhabi movement and its struggle against the British East India Company. The Mopla Rebellion of 1921 was a powerful statement of resistance to British rule in Malabar region of present-day Kerala, India. The rebellion was driven by a variety of factors, from economic exploitation and religious grievances to political oppression. It began with an attack on British officials, landlords, and police stations, eventually leading to the rebels seizing control of multiple villages and towns. In response, the British launched a vicious crackdown, killing and capturing thousands of rebels, while imprisoning or exiling many more. Ultimately, the rebellion was suppressed by early 1922, but its legacy still lives on today and serves as a reminder of the struggles and sacrifices of those who opposed British colonialism. The Birsa Munda Uprising, one of the largest tribal revolts against the British colonial authorities in India, happened in 1899 to 1900 and was led by Birsa Munda of the Munda tribe in present-day Jharkhand. His revolt was a response to exploitation and oppression of the tribal people by the British authorities and local landlords who supported them. The British had introduced restrictive laws, such as the Forest Laws and Land Settlement Acts, and had also introduced Christianity, leading to disruption and resentment. The uprising began with an attack on a police station in Barwadia and later spread to other government buildings and railway stations. The British responded with force and Birsa Munda himself was captured in February 1900 and later died in prison. The uprising had a considerable impact on India, inspiring other tribal movements and also contributing to the growth of the Indian nationalist movement. The legacy of Birsa Munda is still celebrated in Jharkhand and other parts of India. The Rampa Rebellion was an act of resistance to the oppressive policies of the British colonial government and local landlords in the Rampa region of Andhra Pradesh. Poor and landless peasants were exploited and subjected to unfair taxation, leading them to form arms in August 1922 under the leadership of the Communist Party of India. The rebellion quickly spread throughout the region, attacking government buildings, police stations and the properties of the local landlords. The British colonial government attempted to quash the rebellion with military force. This event was a significant moment in India's independence movement as it demonstrated the tenacity of its people and the strength of the communist movement. The Rampa Rebellion was a symbol of courage and resilience that provided inspiration and direction to the nation. Pagal Pandhis movement originated in late 18th century in Bengal, India. The worshippers were noted for their intense religious activities and extreme self-destructive practices. besides their religious practices, they were heavily involved in struggle against British East India Company. The British oppression was considered an infringement of their freedom and resulted in various revolts and uprisings in 19th century, most notably the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Thus, Pagal Pandhis played a significant role in the fight against foreign rule. The Kooka movement, led by Baba Ram Singh, was a form of religious and political protest in the Punjab region of India in the late 19th century. Its members were unified by a unique style of white dress and long hair and their commitment to justice and equality, irrespective of caste and religion. They urged nonviolent civil disobedience and the boycott of British goods as a means to bring about social and economic reform in an area where poor farmers and laborers were especially disadvantaged in comparison to the wealthy and powerful. Some Kookas even took up arms in resistance to the British colonizers, yet Baba Ram Singh was still arrested and sentenced to life in prison in 1872. Regardless of this, the legacy of the Kooka movement persists and has even given rise to more anti-colonial movements, illustrating how far-reaching the power of collective action for a just cause can be. The Chewar Rebellion of 1769 is a significant example of the boldness and ingenuity of the Chewar people and their leader, Tilka Manjhi. Despite being heavily outnumbered and outmatched in weaponry, the Chewar rebels confronted the despotic regulation of the British East India Company and fought for liberty and justice. This insurrection proves that even when faced with unequal power dynamics, individuals can unite and strive to reclaim their entitlements and seek reform. In 1859, there was a major peasant movement in Bengal, India in response to the oppressive policies of the British East India Company and their Indian landlords. This revolt, known as the Indigo Revolt, was a reaction to the forced cultivation of indigo, a blue dye used for export to European markets, on land that was traditionally dedicated to food crops. This system caused widespread poverty and starvation among the peasants, leading to the formation of groups and a refusal to cultivate indigo. They resorted to violence, attacking British landlords and their agents, and destroying indigo factories. Although the revolt was mainly nonviolent, there were some clashes between the peasants and the British forces. Eventually, in 1862, the British government abolished the indigo production system which had caused so much suffering. The Deccan Uprising was an act of resistance by Marathi-speaking peasants to the oppressive policies of the British colonial administration in India during the late 19th century. Heavy taxation, compulsory labor programs and the confiscation of land led to a severe deterioration in the economic and social conditions of the peasant population, such as a rise in food prices due to the replacement of food production with cash crops for the British planters. In June 1875, the peasants of the Satara district refused British taxes, sparking a rebellion that quickly spread to other districts. The British colonial administration responded with military force, but the rebellion was eventually crushed by 1877. The Deccan Uprising is a reminder of the oppression faced by the people of India during their struggle for independence.